thank you guys so much for being here. It's an honor to be able to speak to you. I know there's other things you could have been doing tonight. Kip asked me to keep it at less than 6 hours, so we're going to do that. Just kidding. I do want to point out we have some friends from overseas here too who are living in America now. We have some friends from Poland here, and we have some friends from South Africa. I do have one request of you guys. Our South African friends in the back, they left their country fleeing for their lives with nothing. They arrived at the southern border from Mexico and applied for asylum. They're not legally allowed to work. So, and they're staying not too far from you guys. They're in the back there. If you guys could wave. If anybody's interested in helping in any way, I mean, they don't even have money for, like, you know, basic essentials. If anybody's interested in helping and you live nearby, they'd love to hear from you. Good people. They wrote to me years ago after some of my articles on South Africa, asked if I knew of any way for them to get out of the country. Unfortunately, I didn't, but here they are, and I think they will make great Americans. So, thank you guys for being here. You're always supposed to start speeches with a joke, and this is actually a horrible subject. It's about the most depressing thing you could possibly talk about, but I will start with a joke, because that's what they tell you to do at public speaking school. And so what did socialists use for lighting before candles?
Their brains.
Well, they use electricity and light bulbs, of course, right? It takes a minute to get it. But you can ask people of Venezuela, and they know very well that story, right? So they call themselves progressives, but it's quite the opposite. You know, they're going backwards in time, and it's getting worse and worse. And unfortunately, that's what's coming to America, folks. All these political battles that we're fighting that are important, the fight to limit the size and scope of government, the fight to protect babies, the fight to lower taxes, the fight to keep our Second Amendment rights, all of these fights are important, but we're going to lose every single one unless we pay attention to this issue here, which is the education of our children. I've got some really bad news for you. This just came out, a new poll. 70% of millennials say they will vote for a socialist candidate. 70%. So once we die, I'm actually embarrassed to say I'm a millennial. I don't usually tell people that because then they're like, oh, so you're an idiot then, right? So we're not all idiots, but most of us are, unfortunately. Clearly, right? 70% of us would vote for socialist candidates. So what's going to happen in 30 years when the older generations are passed on and these guys are the ones voting and holding political office and running corporations? It's not going to work well, right? 36% have a positive view of communism, for crying out loud. They only murdered 100 million of their own people in the last 100 years, and what could go wrong, right? The religious data is pretty frightening as well. You know, 50% of young people today are sure God exists, the other 50% are not sure, or they just reject it outright. And both of these statistics, if you stop and think about them, they really take some doing. You know, I have a 3-year-old at home, and you take his stuffed kangaroo, and he says, give me that, that's my kangaroo, right? So even little tiny children understand private property. Nobody needs to teach them the benefits of private property. They already know. And the same is true with God. They've done studies, kids all over the world, in any country, in any culture, from any religious background, before they're exposed to anything about atheism, God, gods, whatever. They understand they were created by an all-powerful and loving being. And they can't quote scripture to you, that's true, but they know that. So this takes a lot of indoctrination, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. 3/4 of young Americans think the government should pay their health care. 2/3, more than 2/3, want the government to give them free college. Over half would rather live in a socialist country. I tell them, hey, Cuba's not far. I'll buy you a plane ticket. Tell us, let us know how it went, right? And then almost half want to abolish our border agency. Right? So that's where this is going, folks. And it's getting worse and worse and worse every generation, and the bulk of it's coming through the public schools. So, speaking of socialists, here's a socialist, right? They don't tell the kids that anymore in public school. He was the leader of the National Socialist Party.
That's right.
That's right. That's the name of the Nazi Party. They were the National Socialist Workers' Party. And he was wrong about almost everything, but he was right about one thing. And this is one of those real quotes. It actually came up at Nuremberg. He said, he alone who owns the youth gains the future. And if you don't believe it, look at the Soviet Union, look at China, look at Germany, look at Cuba, look at Venezuela, right? Over and over and over again. Totalitarians have this figured out, and we need to pay attention. And unfortunately, guys, that's coming to America. I'm going to show you a clip. The reason I bring the PowerPoint is because I'm going to show you all these videos, and I wouldn't expect people to believe this stuff unless I had the proof. So that's why I bring the proof, because I don't want anybody to say, well, can we really trust Alex? That's not the issue, right? We'll see the proof. By the way, everyone always says turn off your phones and whatnot. Keep your phone on, turn it on silent, but anytime I say something like that can't be, get your favorite search engine, except Google, because Google's evil, and look it up, and you'll find out right quick that I'm telling the truth, right? So this is MSLSD, national television, telling us that we need parents out of the way, right? That was the core of Hitler's strategy. Got to get parents out of the way. He was the first government leader anywhere ever to criminalize homeschooling. It's a crime for parents to educate their own children at home. Right? We're going to have the government raise them all, the government's going to educate them all. And he invested a lot in the war planning and the military and all that, but the central plank of his strategy was brainwashing the young people in the government schools. So this is what's happening in America today. This is MSLSD again. Check this out.
We have never invested as much in public education as we should have, because we've always had kind of a private notion of children. Your kid is yours and totally your responsibility. We haven't had a very collective notion of these are our children. So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families, and recognize that kids belong to whole communities. Once it's everybody's responsibility and not just the households, then we start making better investments.
Yeah, because I mean, you guys all know how well collective farming worked in the Soviet Union, right? Hey, why don't we do that with our kids? These people are nuts. And yet this is official U.S. government policy. The Department of Education and the Department of Health and Human Services got together a couple years ago, actually probably 4 years ago now because Obama was still the president, and they said that parents, this is an official policy document, you can still find it on the government's website, parents get to be equal partners with the federal government in the raising of their own children. Very soon we'll be the junior partners. And they say, yeah, we'll be equal partners, but we need to send bureaucrats to visit your home, make sure you're doing what we think you ought to be doing. You might need parenting lessons, you know, the other equal partner knows better than we parents do. And that's where this is going, folks, official policy in the United States. And they've been working on it for a while. Hillary Clinton told us more than 20 years ago, it takes a village to raise your children. And if you actually read the book, it takes a government village to raise your children, right, in the minds of these people. And here's what happens when the government village raises your children. Right? Yep. Some of you guys probably remember these faces. This is David Hogg and his sidekick, Emma Riley. And one of their fellow students, after spending 12 years in a government indoctrination center masquerading as a school, got a gun and shot up some of his fellow students. And, you know, sensible people said, what in the world did they fill that child's head with for 12 years that he went and shot up other kids? Right? That didn't used to happen. 30, 40 years ago, that didn't used to happen. I mean, some of you guys were around in the 40s, 50s. How many school shootings did you have in the 40s and 50s? None, right? Till Columbine, this was not even a thing. Now it's like every other week, it seems like. So what happened is not access to guns, right? You used to be able to order machine guns in the Sears catalog, and the kids didn't used to shoot each other. Right? You didn't need an ID or a permit or a license or a background check, nothing. And the kids didn't used to shoot each other. They didn't used to kill themselves. They didn't used to join gangs and kill their babies. What's going on here, right? Is it because we don't have enough gun control? Well, of course it's not, right? It's what they're teaching the kids. And I'm going to show you guys what it is. But first, I want to point out that there is like an end destination here, right? This isn't just kind of haphazard happening accidentally. They do have a goal in mind. And rather than tell you guys the goal myself, I'm going to let them speak for themselves. So here's George H.W. Bush.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle.
This was national television, 1991.
When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order.
He's sure, right? He's got 87% of your kids. Of course he's confident.
Can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founder.
So there's a lot to unpack in that statement, right? We're going to have rule of law is going to govern the conduct of nations. So by definition, we're talking about global law. We're going to use the UN's peacekeeping role. Their peacekeeping tree, you know, the goobers with the blue helmets and the machine guns and the attack helicopters. They especially like to pick on third world countries. But if you know anything about the history, this is an abomination, right? Their first big peace mission down in Katanga, these people didn't want to live under a mass-murdering Soviet-backed communist dictator. They said, thank you, we'll just be our own country here. We'll be pro-Western, pro-America, Christian, free market. Oh, no, you can't have that. The UN knows better, right? So they sent in their peace troops, slaughtered women and children, bayoneted 9-year-old kids, bombed hospitals, shot at civilian cars as they were trying to flee, until these people would submit to this totalitarian regime, right? More recently, it hasn't improved much. Just in the last 10 years, a group called Hear Their Cries, senior former UN officials estimated that 60,000 women and children have been raped by these UN peace troops. Yep. So what are we going to do with the UN peace troops? He told us we're going to build a new world order where a credible United Nations is going to implement the vision of the UN's founders. And that's pretty revealing, too. What do we know about the UN's founders? Well, on one side of the table, after World War II, right, you had Joseph Stalin. One of the worst butchers to ever walk on this planet. Murdered 30 to 50 million human beings. He didn't keep very good records, so we don't know exactly. But a lot of people died as a result. But at least America was there too, right? Saving grace. Well, They don't teach this in the public schools anymore either. But there was a guy called Alger Hiss. That's who we sent. He worked at the State Department, and they loved this guy. That should have been our first red flag, no pun intended. They made him the chairman of the conference that created the UN Charter. They made him the first Secretary General of the UN. They let him take all his delegates down to the Bohemian Grove in Northern California, where they do very bizarre rituals. The guy snuck in with a video camera. You can want to go down that rabbit hole, you can. And then we threw him in prison because he was working for Joseph Stalin. He was a Soviet agent. So our representative there was also a Soviet agent. So we're going to implement a new world order based on the vision of the UN's founders using the UN's military. Anybody think that's a good idea? Right? Okay, and they don't ask us, right? They just say, well, when we are successful, and we will. How can you be so sure? They didn't ask us. They don't know what we think. Well, they're so sure because they have our kids. 87% of them are being prepared right now for this future. And unfortunately, it's not Republicans only, right? I wish it was just a Republican problem, then we could all go vote for Democrats and we'd be safe, right? You guys are like, what? But here is the leader of the Communist Party in the 2020 election, front runner, right?
The affirmative task we have now is to actually create a new world order.
New world order. Everybody's least favorite rapist.
After 1989, President Bush said, and it's a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order.
Yeah, so they all agree on the important things, right? We need a new world order. They're not going to ask you, they're just going to tell you, right? And if you want to know what this new world order is going to look like, if you want to understand the ideology that's guiding it, just take everything God commanded in the Bible, flip it exactly upside down, and you have a real good sense of where it's going, right? So start at the very beginning in Genesis. God created the male and female. So what do they teach the kids? Oh, that's bigotry. That's hatred. Today you can be any gender you want, and anybody tells you different, we're going to put them in jail. That's what they're teaching the kids. I'm going to show you in a minute. What about marriage, right? God created marriage before he even created government. So what do they teach the kid? Oh, that's old-fashioned, silly stuff, marriage. You know, today we're more enlightened. Marriage could be 3 guys, 2 transgender things, and a goat. Right? The Supreme Court said so. What do you mean? How dare you? Right? Private property. God said, thou shalt not steal. That's pretty clear, right? It's not a lot of wiggle room. So what do they teach the kid? Private property is at the root of social injustice. We need to institutionalize thievery. We need to steal everybody's private property so we can redistribute it to the slaves. I mean citizens, right? The comrades. Got to get rid of free markets. Got to get rid of even nations, right? God created nations after the Tower of Babel. God said, hey, you guys all go off. You all get to be your own nations. You all be separate, right? You all have your own languages. So what do they teach the kids today? Oh, that's bigotry too. Today we're all one happy global family. We're just going to live under one new world order, happy global government, right? Everything God told us is being flipped upside down, and they know we're not going to go for that, right? They call us bitter clingers. We're going to cling to our guns and cling to our Bibles. That's what Obama called us. We're bitter clingers. So how are they going to make this happen? Fortunately, it's not a mystery. They told us, right? They've got 2 international agreements that are leading the way on this. Every government on the planet, including ours, has signed on. First one's Agenda 21, and if you watch the Communist News Network, CNN, they'll tell you that's a conspiracy theory, right? It might have been a conspiracy, but it's certainly not a theory, and we'll show that in a moment. And then Agenda 2030. Obama signed this in 2030. Every government and tyrant on the planet thought, oh, this is so wonderful, right? So just to prove that Agenda 21 is not a conspiracy theory like CNN would like you to believe, here's good old George H.W. Bush talking about it. He's the one who created it.
On the importance of economic instruments and free markets were included in this mammoth Agenda 21 document and the Rio Declaration.
But it's a conspiracy
theory.
theory.
Clear on one fundamental point.
Somebody ought to ask this guy some questions, right? I mean, he's gone now. He went to go meet his maker, and I can't imagine that went very well. But here's the leader of the Communist Party in Congress, and she also is a big fan of Agenda 21. Who's surprised? Right here it is.
The Earth Summit Environmental Leadership Act, as this is known, presents us with an opportunity to follow up on the important work of the Earth Summit to develop its blueprint, Agenda 21, for global environmental action. HCON Res 353 outlines a comprehensive national strategy for sustainable development in accordance with the principles of Agenda 21.
A comprehensive national strategy in accordance with the principles of Agenda 21. What a great idea. But it's a conspiracy theory. CNN said so. Just go back to sleep, right? Nothing to worry about. Well, here's what the guys who created Agenda 21 said about it. Right? This is from the authors of Agenda 21. It's hundreds and hundreds of pages, so we'll just look at the summary. It proposes an array of actions intended to be implemented by every person on Earth. Every one of you, every one of your kids, every one of your grandkids, every pygmy in Central Africa, every tribesman in the Amazon rainforest, every rural American homeschooler in the middle of nowhere in Oklahoma, every last person on this planet. And they'll tell you over and over and over again. And it's going to require a profound reorientation of all human society, unlike anything the world has ever experienced. So let that sink in, guys. These are big plans. And again, nobody asked us if we thought this was a good idea. They just told us this is what's going to happen. And they know, again, we're bitter clingers, right? We're never going to get older Americans. So what do we do about this? Fortunately, they tell us their strategy. Go to chapter 36. They tell you that education is going to be critical for promoting sustainable development. Later, they tell you that formal and non-formal education are going to be indispensable. It means that it won't work without it. It's indispensable to changing people's attitudes. And there's going to have to be a lot of attitude changing, right? All these bitter clingers in here, not going to give up their families or their farms or their homes or their guns or their Bibles. We need a lot of attitude changing, right? In the next, also in chapter 36, they say this education is going to be critical for giving the kids the right values, attitudes, beliefs. They say it has to include spiritual development. What about separation of church and state? Well, nobody told the UN, right? And this will be important later. We'll come back to this. And then they say it needs to be integrated into all disciplines. It's not enough just in history or science or whatever. Here's another sample of what they're teaching the kids for Agenda 21. This is a book produced by the UN. I have it at home. I almost brought it, but American Airlines charges you $50 to bring a suitcase, so I didn't bring it. But it's called Rescue Mission Planet Earth, a children's edition of Agenda 21. And here's one of the pages. You guys can see the Hindu gods up here. They look very upset and perplexed because the storks are bringing all these babies. And then on the page across from this, they tell you why they're so perplexed. The earth groans every time it registers another birth. Kids are bad. Mother Earth is groaning. And compare that with what God says. God says children are a blessing. God says be fruitful and multiply. God wants you to have children, but the UN is teaching your children that children are bad. Mother Earth is going to groan if you have more children. This is a post. I went down to the UN Conference on Sustainable Development in Rio in 2012, 20 years to the day after they developed Agenda 21. And obviously it was chaired by a Chinese communist. I mean, who else would you have chair these things? And they were developing Roadmap for Humanity. And they had these posters everywhere. They had conscripted a bunch of children into making them. And you can see here the Earth looks very sick. It's sad. He's got the thermometer. But fortunately, the doctor is on hand. I know your problem. You have humans. You guys are a disease on this planet. But fortunately, Dr. UN is here to save us, right? In Agenda 2030, this was approved in 2015 by every government on the planet. They tell you again, your children are critical agents of change. They're going to use these new goals. They've got 17 sustainable development goals to create a better world. And who could disagree with that, right? I want a better world. We all want a better world, don't we? But what does the UN mean when they say better world? Fortunately, we don't have to speculate again. They'll tell you in the same agreement. Goal number 10, they tell you we need to... National Socialism didn't work out well enough. Now we need global socialism. They say that we have to reduce inequality within and among countries. To do that, it's only going to be possible if we share the wealth, right? This is the same exact rhetoric we heard from Castro. It's the same exact rhetoric we heard from Chavez and Kim Jong-un, Rocket Man, and Mao and Lenin and Stalin, right? We've heard this. We've seen this movie before. They also tell you the government needs to control consumption and production. Then they tell you in goal number 4 how they're going to get there. Right, so it's not me telling you that they're going to brainwash your kids to bring this about. It's them telling you. In goal number 4, which is all dedicated to education, they say that by 2030, all learners, again, every single child on this planet needs to be so brainwashed, they won't just, passively roll over and submit to this sustainable development. They're going to promote it. And again, that's going to take a lot of attitude changing, isn't it? Ban Ki-moon, who was the head of the UN when they came up with this, called it the Global Declaration of Interdependence, a direct attack on our Declaration of Independence. And the UN General Assembly chief, Peter Thompson, at the time said it was the master plan for humanity. And they must have focus grouped it because then they all went around saying this was the master plan for humanity. And that the UN was the parliament of humanity, right? A parliament is a legislative, a law-making body. Here's the UN and one of their propaganda videos telling you what I'm telling you now. Education is the way they're going to make this happen.
Achieve sustainable development that protects our planet and builds a more inclusive, equal, and peaceful world without education. We can't. Sustainable development begins with education. Put global education first.
Sustainable development begins with education. That's the UN telling you that, right? Here's UNESCO, they're the ones who made this video. That's the UN's education agency. And you have to put global education first, is what they told you. And I've got a few more of these I'll show you as we go. But first I want to show you how this works, because they've been doing it for a long time. They know it's very effective. So in the early 1990s, if I had told you we would soon be celebrating homosexual marriages in America, you would have laughed at me. I mean, maybe you would have called the guys with the white coats, you know, get this guy to the funny farm, what in the world is he talking about? Well, the New American Magazine was warning you back in the 90s. We'll talk about this in a minute. But nobody else was, right? I mean, the average American it would have been inconceivable that we would have homosexual marriages here. Sodomy was still a crime across most of the United States when this came out. Early 1990s, they produced this documentary called It's Elementary, talking about gay issues at school. And it was produced by homosexuals. They showed it in first grade, second grade, third grade classrooms all across America. I was about that age when this came out. I was about 7, 8 years old when they started showing this in schools all over America. I was outside of America. But I'm going to show you a quick clip from this video so that you can see how they prepared the children. Check this out.
Let me tell you quickly the background. Today, the law says that if you're the same sex, 2 men and 2 women, you can't get married. It is against the law. And I thought that it might be kind of fun for us to sort of be pretend judges for a few minutes. What I'm going to give each of you is a sheet that just tells you that some people think that it's wrong for gays to get married, that it's not natural, and that it goes against what a family is. Other people think that the state should not decide these things, that it should just be up to 2 adults to decide what they want to do. What do you think the answer to these questions are? Should gays be allowed to marry? Should they not?
I don't see why they shouldn't. I don't see why they shouldn't get married.
So pretend judges, did you catch that? Kids, think of yourselves as pretend judges. What do we do about these horrible laws prohibiting homosexual marriage? Well, we're going to strike them all down, right? A generation later, that's our White House lit up in LGBT colors. Here is public school teachers with their union marching in a gay pride parade. And here is mainstream America today. Good Morning America, right? Drag kids, 11 years old, on national television.
Desmond Annapolis getting ready for this trailblazing 11-year-old drag kid who RuPaul is calling the future. His bravery is inspiring so many. We're going to talk to him in just a moment.
Anyway, it goes on for a while. So I'm going to show you now what they're teaching the kids today. And if you were educated prior to like 2005, it's going to sound absolutely crazy to you. But, you know, we all learned that carbon dioxide is the gas of life. People exhale it, plants use it for photosynthesis, and that's just how the world works, right? Well, they're teaching the kids that not only is it not the gas of life, it's a dangerous toxic pollution that's going to kill us all unless we let the UN tax it and regulate it. Okay? And here's a video from the UN explaining what they want to happen.
We hope that as many schools as possible will follow examples like this, and we will support them in their efforts. Education is a powerful tool to address climate change and to ensure that the rights and needs of people today and tomorrow can be met. Let us use it and get active today.
Education to stop the climate change, right? 1,000 years ago, it was a lot warmer on this planet, and a lot of Vikings lived in Greenland, and they were farming and raising animals. And they got colder and colder and colder. They said, oh, the gods must be mad at us, right? Quick, sacrifice some children, see if we can stop the climate change. Guess what? It didn't work, because the climate has always changed, and it always will. And I submit to you that that was probably just as effective as educating the children to stop climate change, right? It's ludicrous. From a scientific point of view, the idea that carbon dioxide changes the climate is absurd. Humans emit about 2 pounds of it every day when they breathe. Human emissions of CO2 make up a fraction of 1% of all the greenhouse gases naturally in the atmosphere. One volcano blown up could put out more than all humans throughout all of human history. And yet, they're telling the kids that this is a dangerous toxic pollution. We're all doomed in 12 years unless we let the UN tax and regulate us. So from a scientific perspective, it's ludicrous. I've been going to the UN climate summits for over 10 years now. I've interviewed a lot of their own scientists. You can find them on YouTube. They'll tell you the whole thing's a fraud. Right? The whole thing is a fraud. Some of them have had to resign because it was so ludicrous. And, but from a totalitarian perspective, it is brilliant. There's nothing you can do that doesn't involve CO2 emissions. You can't eat, you can't sleep, you can't breathe, you can't turn on a light switch, you can't get in your car, you can't even die without CO2 emissions, right? You die and then you decompose and CO2 comes out. And that's fine because the plants need it for photosynthesis. Plants are actually designed to live in an atmosphere with 4 to 5 times as much CO2 as we have right now. That's what Trump's climate advisor told me, a very relaxed, calm physicist from Princeton University. This is very obvious. That's why farmers pump CO2 into their greenhouses, right? And that's why they've been doing that for a long time. It's not pollution, right? You don't exhale pollution. That's absurd. But from a totalitarian perspective, it's brilliant. So check out what they're showing kids in American schools today.
You've heard the reports. The globe's warming. It's our fault. And the consequences will be terrible. Children are frightened.
I worry. My mom worries the water might rise and it might flood the whole town.
We won't be able to survive for long.
What are you most worried will happen?
We'll all die.
Are there some people who say this isn't true?
Yes.
Might they be right?
No.
How do you know they're not right?
Well, because the earth is getting hotter.
Where do you learn this?
Now, doesn't this remind you of a doomsday cult? Right? Don't drink the Kool-Aid whenever you do. Right? This is a school in Florida, by the way. It's happening all across America and all over the world.
One of the main components after educating the students of global warming is that they're given a letter for their families to sign, and then it's to the congressman.
A letter for their congressman, right? You brainwash them and you turn them into political activists, and this is what comes out the other side, right? They'll give us climate justice, let the, and you know, people would have asked a few years ago, you know, this AOC, right? Just give me 1 minute. Like, you know, a few years ago, if you had told people that millions of young Americans would be running around believing that the world was doomed in 12 years unless we let the UN tax and regulate us, unless we ban cow farts, unless we ban airplanes, you would have laughed. It would have been so absurd, right? But they've prepared enough of our young people that they can now get away with this idiocy, right? And, you know, we still have this idea that we send our kids to school to learn how to read, write, and do math, right? A lot of people still think that. Unfortunately, that's not at all what's happening. I'm going to show you a video from my friend Charlotte Iserbit. She's become a good friend of mine in recent years, and she was the senior advisor on education policy in the Ronald Reagan administration. She got to her post at the Department of Education, and she said, what are all these documents? They're turning American schools into Soviet schools. This is a terrible idea. So she starts leaking these to the press, put them all together in a book, The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America, because she knew nobody would believe it if she didn't leak the documents. And here's what she says is happening in the schools. Check it out.
You think the purpose of education is reading, writing, and arithmetic? The purpose of education is to change the thoughts, actions, and feelings of students.
Change the thoughts, actions, and feelings. And here's somebody who actually loves this idea. This is Shirley McCoon. She was hired to help write national standards even before most of us realized we had national standards. This is from the Bush and the Clinton era. Here she is speaking to the National Governors Association, which eventually developed Common Core, explaining what's going on. So pay close attention to what she has to say.
Fix up these schools and taking care of them. Rather than the issue of understanding that what we're into is a total restructuring of the society.
Total restructuring of the society. In the interest of time, we'll go quick, but now check out what she says the schools are doing to bring this about.
The other function of schools, which sounds paradoxical and yet in a sense is really not, is the fact that we have to prepare students not for today's society, but for a society that's 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road. And so we have to anticipate what the future is and then move back and figure out what it is we need to do today. That's called anticipatory socialization, or the social change function of school.
The social change function of school. They're going to look into the future, 50 years, with their crystal balls and their tea leaves and their palm reading, and they're going to tell us what's going to happen, and then they're going to social change our children to make us ready for it, right? This is crazy talk, and yet these are the people who designed the system where our children are being educated. I want to show you some of this total transformation of our society, this total restructuring of our society that the schools are bringing about through their social change function. So in Florida, there was a girl who decided she was actually a boy. The school administration said, hey, you should go shower and change with the boys in the boys' locker room before and after PE. Oh, okay. Goes in there, the boys literally have their pants down, they all come running out, like, teacher, what's going on here? There's a girl in there. Teacher wasn't allowed to say anything. And then they said, teacher, you have to go in there and supervise all this. You have to go watch this underage girl get naked and shower and do whatever. He said, well, I can't do that. This is an underage girl. We used to throw people in prison for that just a few years ago, right? That's crazy. So he refused. They said, well, we're going to have to fire you. We're going to have to take away your teaching credentials so you'll never work as a teacher again. And we're going to destroy your life, right? We got the emails later. They wanted to use him as an example so that no teacher ever again would ever resist this crazy agenda. Any girls in here, do you guys want your daughters, any men in here, you want your daughters being supervised by grown men while they're changing? I mean, it's crazy, right? This is the fundamental transformation. In Minnesota, they went one step further. A little boy decided he actually was a girl, and mom, dad, can I have a sex change? No, right? That's crazy. Get back to school, please. Well, the other partner in this relationship knew better, so the public school took him to go have his genitals surgically removed. He was castrated, given a sex change operation. He was put on hormones, put on opiates to deal with the pain of being castrated, which is pretty significant, I understand. And hey, there's a federal lawsuit about it now, but guess what? That ship has sailed. Those genitals cannot be reattached, right? How old was he? I don't know exactly how old he is. They protected his identity in the federal lawsuit, but it's crazy. Here in California, this comes literally from the government's website. This just went up recently. They have a gender support plan. So when a child comes to the school and says, hey, you know what, I feel like a girl or a boy or a transgender or whatever, the school prepares a gender support plan, and then they have an individual transition plan. One of the questions on the individual transition plan is, do your parents know and are they okay? If they don't know, or if they're not okay with it, they'll do it behind their back. They'll put you on hormone treatments without telling your parents. They won't even tell your parents that they're calling you by a girl name or a boy name. Right? So they're doing it all behind the parents' back. A lot of parents in California are going to be surprised when their little son comes back from school as a daughter without his genitals. Right? And I mean, obviously, again, from a scientific perspective, this is absurd. Every strand of DNA in your body testifies to the fact that you're either a boy or a girl. Chopping off private parts and mutilating yourself doesn't make any difference. But this is what they're teaching our kids. In California, they just adopted a new health education framework. It's called Who Are You? The Kid's Guide to Gender Identity. They say, oh, we used to believe that there was male and female, but now we know there's infinite genders. They give the kids 15 different examples so they can choose. You could be agender, bigender, trigender, nu, trois, free spirit, none of the above. Some things I can't even pronounce. Right? And then when they get a little older in California, under the same health education framework, they've got this book, SEX, Everything You Need to Know About Sex in Your Teens and 20s. And this is some of the stuff they teach. And probably most of you guys don't even know what this is, and you're very lucky about that. They have fisting, blood play, sadomasochism, sexual torture, orgies, all this fun stuff that middle schoolers and high school children are supposed to engage in the state of California. This is the Drag Queen Story Hour. If you go to their website, they will brag about the fact that all over America, they're going into kindergarten classrooms, first grade classrooms, second grade classrooms. Needless to say, that's a man. Obviously, I probably don't need to point that out to you. Wearing a dress and some demon horns, just so you know it came straight from the pit of hell.
The libraries are doing it.
And they're doing it in the libraries, too. That's right. It is happening across America. This is Jessica Lahore. A middle school in Colorado brought him in to do a career day. A middle school. And I wrote an article about this, and I just questioned whether it was appropriate. I said it wasn't clear if they brought in also prostitutes and strippers. And this Jessica Lahore got really mad and rounded up this whole mob, and they started bombarding me with hate mail, and you should kill yourself, you should die, you're not tolerant. Yeah, and I don't think they got the irony. Right, exactly, it's crazy. And so the National Education Association, the largest teachers union in America, just joined forces with the Human Rights Campaign, a radical LGBT group. And this they just sent out a few days ago. It's a video to prepare teachers for non-binary students. Check this out.
Hi, your name is Emma? Yeah. Correct? And my name is Z. What pronouns do you use?
What pronouns do you use?
She, they, and them. What pronouns do you use?
I use they, them, and also just Z. And so instead of being a boy or girl or something undefined or in the middle, I kind of like, just use my name. You know, my name is Z. So if you just use Z instead of a pronoun, it's like more personalized and like less fitting into a binary. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is for teachers, right? This went out to teachers all across America from the NEA, the National Education Association. Now check this out. You got to educate your teachers so they know, right?
It's cool when teachers ask pronouns. That was never a thing. When I was like in elementary school or even middle school, did you find that you would ask for that, right? Or even educate your teachers?
Got to educate
when I had a substitute, sometimes I had to.
Yeah, so sometimes I had to educate your substitute teacher because they didn't know about my pronouns, right? This is madness, and yet this is the public schools in America. And check it out, guys, it's working. It's working very, very well. You know, when I was a kid, I grew up in 8 countries on 4 continents, met people of every different religion and nation and culture you could possibly imagine, and then a whole bunch you can't. I never once in my entire life met a boy who thought he was a girl, or much less something else, right? I never once in my whole life met a girl who thought she was a boy, much less something else. Never. Never, never, never. In fact, the word transgender wasn't even in the dictionary when I was a kid. And today, according to the UCLA, this study just came out this year, 27% of California's teenagers, 12 to 17, are gender nonconforming. The younger ones are even worse. 27% of boys don't know that they're boys. 27% of girls don't know that they're girls. How long do we have to wait until we say, wait a minute, guys, what in the world are you teaching these poor kids? Right? When I was a kid, nobody was confused about their gender. Now it's 27%. Are we going to wait till it's 50%? And it gets worse. In California, they passed a law mandating that all children in all schools learn about the history of the LGBT movement. So naturally, the first thing they teach them about is Harvey Milk, the first openly homosexual elected official in America. They don't teach the kids that he was a child rapist and that some of his victims went on to kill themselves because they were so horrified. But I got a copy of the curriculum they're using as part of this LGBT training. And after they teach about Harvey Milk and the history of the sexual revolution, they get down to ancient Greece. And in ancient Greece, grown men used to have sex with boys. This is part of the history of the LGBT movement, is what they're teaching in California. And so this mom got pretty upset that they were teaching her children pedophilia. So she went to a meeting with the school, with the administration officials from the school district, and said, "Why are you teaching pedophilia to my children?" And in a sane world, they'd be like, "Oh my goodness, we're so sorry. How could that have possibly happened? Oh my goodness, it must have been an oversight." Well, here's what the assistant superintendent of curricula explained to this mom.
Answering why you're teaching pedophilia in school at ninth graders. Teaching what? Pedophilia. Pederasty, right here. Pederasty, as I've discussed with you before, twice in my office when you come to view the materials, I've explained to you that this is done because we are talking about historical perspectives of how gender relations and different types of sexual orientations have existed in history.
Different types of sexual orientation? Yeah, raping kids, it's just a sexual orientation.
Something that's occurred in history.
Something that's occurred in history. Yeah, something that occurred in history. I can think of a lot of things that occurred in history. Jesus walked on this planet, completely changed everything. They don't teach the kids that, right? They're not allowed to teach the kids that. So obviously it's not just if something occurred in history. That's not how they decide what to teach. And then they said it's a sexual orientation. Raping children is a sexual orientation. So, you know, we all recognize that it would be absolutely insane to put a pedophile in charge of the Sunday school ministry or in charge of a school, right? Well, in California and in Connecticut and in 26 states in America, it's against the law to discriminate based on sexual orientation. And they're teaching the children that raping children is a sexual orientation. How long before these kids grow up and say, well, of course you need a pedophile to run your school? What do you mean? You can't discriminate, right? And this is a pattern. Also a school in California, a kid posted this on Twitter. You can see up here, pedophilia as a sexual orientation. Right, there's a pattern emerging here. They are grooming our children. Here's a survey from NBC Fake News. Again, it's working. 20% of millennials identify as LGBTQ whatever. It's one more reason why I don't identify as a millennial. Right? And here's a UNESCO report. This is the global sex education standards. They tell you that when the kids are 5, they need to learn about sexual pleasure and masturbation. Let me tell you something. I have a 5-year-old at home. Anybody tries to teach him about sexual pleasure, it's going to be a really big problem because that's what pedophiles do, right? 5-year-olds don't need to know about sexual pleasure. 5-year-olds play with stuffed animals and toy cars, and they play cowboys and Indians, right? This is perversion on an enormous scale. By the time they're 9, they need to be able to defend taxpayer-funded abortions. And it gets worse, right? Homosexuality, fornication, transgenderism, all. And then they say it's a science-based curriculum, right? How dare you argue with a science-based curriculum? So where does the science come from? More than 20 times Planned Parenthood is listed in the references. And then there's this guy, Alfred Kinsey, a pedophile responsible for the rape and sexual torture of thousands of children, some as young as 5 months old. They were raping a 4-year-old boy, and they said, oh look, he cried and passed out. That must have been pleasurable. See, children are sexual beings. These are the kinds of perverts who designed the system that is now being used to teach our children. And I'm sorry, this is evil. This is not just a difference of opinion, right? A big part, Congress was actually going to investigate this Kinsey character, this child rapist. And then these foundations all stepped in. Rockefeller, Carnegie, the Ford Foundation. They got billions of dollars locked up in tax-exempt accounts. And Congress did study these foundations. And they also studied the role of these foundations in education. I want to show you just something real quick. They came out with a report back in 1952. It was the Select Committee to Investigate Tax-Exempt Foundations and Comparable Organizations. They said there had been a revolution in America, in past tense. Pre-1952, there had been a revolution already in America. And they said that it could not have occurred peacefully or with the consent of the majority unless education in the United States had prepared the way in advance to endorse it. As this has been going on for a long time, guys. I'm going to show you a quick clip of the guy who was in charge of this investigation. His name was Norman Dodd. He was the chief investigator for this congressional committee. Here's what he said. He had a conversation with the president of the Ford Foundation, and here's what he says the president of the Ford Foundation told him in his office.
He said, yes, Mr. Gator, I'd like very much to know. Whereupon he made this statement to me, namely, Mr. Dodd, we here operate on similar in response to similar directives, the substance of which is that we shall use our grant-making power so to alter life in the United States that it can be comfortably merged with the Soviet Union.
Now there's a good idea if I ever heard one. We're going to comfortably merge America with the Soviet Union. And they used education as the key method. So here is a bunch of brainwashed children. This happened all across America. There's hundreds of these videos on YouTube from every state singing praises to our dear leader, Donald Trump.
Okay, now everybody, let's sing it together on the count of 3. Right. I like that. 1, 2, 3.
Just kidding. You guys knew it wasn't Trump, right? Can you imagine if they were singing about Trump? So anyway, it goes on. And then, of course, they said Barack Obama was going to make America strong again. But what he actually did was bring in Common Core, which made us dumber than ever before. And the federal government's own studies prove this, right? Here is Dr. Sandra Stosky. The Common Core people put together a validation committee. They called themselves a rubber stamp. And they put 2 subject matter experts, one in English, one in math. I know this lady. I serve on a board with her. She's very nice. We disagree on almost everything, but we do agree kids should have a proper education. And she said the Common Core reduces the ability of children to develop critical thinking skills. We're taking out all the great literature, replacing it with like EPA regulations about roof insulation, and the people who wrote it didn't care how crummy it was. So she refused to sign off. Now she goes across America talking about how horrible it is. This is Dr. Louisa Moats. She was hired to write the early literacy standards. And again, she and I disagree on almost everything politically, but when it comes to reading, we agree. Children should learn how to read, and they should learn how to read the only way you can really teach reading with a phonetic writing system, which is through phonics. Well, they took out all the great stuff she put in, replaced it with quackery, and so now she's speaking out. She says Common Core doesn't reflect how children learn how to read. Here's the only math expert they put on the Common Core Validation Committee, Dr. James Milgram of Stanford. I also serve on a board with him, a very nice guy, even though we disagree on playing. He says the Common Core is written to reflect very low expectations. It says non-challenging as possible with extremely serious failings. There are actual errors in the math, and they are neither mathematically correct nor especially clear. So why don't we mandate them in all 50 states so that we end up with a nation of morons who couldn't design a bridge if their life depended on it, right? That's what's happening, folks. You want to see what Common Core math looks like? Check this out.
Mean for your kid? Well, here's a sample math problem.
Compose and decompose numbers from 11 to 19 into 10 ones and some further ones by using objects or drawings and record each composition.
That's my producer, Ricky Ratliff, right outside the studio, asking people to solve a Common Core math problem.
10 plus 8. Understand that these numbers are composed of 10 ones and 1, 2, 3, 4.
Seem complex? No kidding. And yet that is a problem for kindergarten students, 5- and 6-year-olds. Seems crazy to me. Here's a question some first graders will get under the standards.
Okay, kids, class is in session.
What is 32 minus 12? 20, right? You just subtract. But not under the new Common Core method.
Why are they going through this backwards method here?
This man who trained in nuclear engineering couldn't understand.
I don't understand.
He wasn't the...
So nuclear engineers can't figure out first grade math problems, and we expect our children to learn how to do math this way. Let me tell you a secret. Nobody's going to learn how to do math this way. This is idiotic in the extreme, and it's designed to make sure children never learn how to do math. And children who can't do math also have trouble with basic reasoning and thinking, right? It's hard to make a logical argument when you can't figure out basic mathematics. And yet this is now all of our children all over America in all public schools, right? Every single one of the 50 states.
Not Virginia.
The federal, even the states that said they didn't accept it, it came in through the back door through the textbooks. Texas also, and Alaska, and Minnesota, a handful of states initially resisted, but it's still there. And so this is a federal government study that came out just this year. They said Common Core had significant negative effects 7 years after the adoption of the new standards. The magnitude of the negative effects gets worse as time goes on. So hey, we better keep them there, right? The same people who brought you Common Core, deep state people, also brought you the national pseudoscience standards. They call them the next generation science standards. And probably some of you guys remember school, you probably learned in science class about the scientific method. Well, guess what? 12 years into the national science standards, you will never hear the word scientific method. You'll go through your entire education without ever hearing the term scientific method. What you will learn is that the gas you exhale is a toxic pollution and only the UN can save us, and we only have 12 years. And you'll also learn that you came from slime that somehow came alive and turned into a monkey and then a human, and there is no God, and yeah. So as long as you believe those things, you're good. If you don't, we're in trouble. In history, they're learning nothing but fake history. They're teaching the kids that America invented slavery. One of the guys working on this project with me, Dr. Duke Pesta, he has been a university professor for over 10 years, and every year he invites his students to fill out a survey, a questionnaire about what they know. What he found is that every single year he's given this questionnaire, the majority of his students believe Americans invented slavery. If they knew anything about history, they'd know slavery has been ubiquitous from the time people were on this planet, and that one civilization, the Anglo-Saxon civilization, our cousins in Britain, decided, hey, slavery is wrong. The Bible says slavery is wrong, and we're not going to tolerate it anymore. Not only in our own countries, but also all over the world. I mean, you could still buy and sell slaves legally in Mauritania until 2007. That's a true story. But America said, no, that's wrong. Not just for America, but for everywhere, right? So we and the British ended it. And yet the kids have no idea. They think that America invented it. So it's no wonder they want to burn down our country, right? It's no wonder. They think not only are we not exceptional, we are exceptionally evil. Then they learn that the Second Amendment protects the right of the government to have a militia. They learn that Donald Trump is a racist and all his supporters are racist rural white people. Here they are bowing down in a mosque on a field trip. Can you imagine if they were at a church? Here's a school in Kansas with the 5 pillars of Islam. There was actually a court case that the Supreme Court just turned down. They were forcing the kids to recite the Shahada, the Islamic conversion prayer. When a Muslim hears you say that, they say, you're a Muslim now. And it's the death penalty if you leave Islam. So they got all these little kids saying Allah is the one God and Muhammad is his messenger. Can you imagine if the kids were reciting the Lord's Prayer? Can you imagine if they had the 10 Commandments on the wall of the school in Kansas? The ACLU would be on you faster than flies on poop. Right? They'd send the SWAT team in, break down the door. And yet this is happening all over. And it's every false religion is welcome in the schools. Here, in every public school in America now, they've got this thing they call mindfulness education, just Buddhism in disguise. And in fact, one of the gurus that they cite, you don't even want to go down that rabbit hole. The guy is absolutely nuts. But they're making the kids do Buddhist meditation, get in touch with their inner spiritual self and all this stuff. Then they make the kids do yoga so they can be stretchy, right? They don't tell them that this is Hindu rituals with very serious spiritual implications. Yet all over America, kids are doing Hinduism.
Yeah.
Here you have students forced to apologize for their Christian privilege. And this is in North Carolina. The kids had to go stand up in front of the class and say, I'm sorry for my Christian privilege. Right? All over America, this stuff is happening. And, you know, the Common Core and the indoctrination is only one side of this. The other side is all the data they're getting on the kids. Right? Here is EMAR. The federal government created this robot. They found out that kids would be more likely to give their private mental health data to a robot than to a person. So, hey, let's create a robot. That's what we need. This is from a Department of Education report. I'll point you to this here. It's called a facial expression camera. And according to the Department of Education report, they set it in front of the student, and it monitors the facial expressions that the children make as they're exposed to different stimuli. So maybe a guy comes in wearing a dress and some demon horns and flashes the kids and reads some LGBT stories, and the kid goes, what is that? What's going on here? Aha, this one needs an intervention, right? That's the purpose of these tools. They decide when the kid needs an intervention. And what are they doing with all this data? They have more data on your kids than you do, by the way. They know about their dental health, their mental health, how daddy talks to mommy. They know what food you have in the refrigerator. They know if anybody smokes. They know what religion you are. They know how your children respond to certain stimuli. Right? You couldn't even believe the amount of data they have. They know everything they search for on the internet. And then they say all this data captured from the children is going to enable the algorithms to infer the knowledge, intentions, and interests of these children, and it's going to enable their models to create algorithms that will predict the future behavior and interests of the children. Can you see how Orwellian this is becoming? Then they've got values clarification, and I was subjected to this as a child. They still do it all over the world, all over America. Some of you might have even experienced it. So what they do, and the UN, they put out a pamphlet for teachers everywhere. What's the purpose of this? To undermine children's belief in moral absolutes, and it's very effective, right? And I'll tell you, the one they used on me when I was a kid, there's 9 of you in a life raft, and the life raft can only hold 8 people. And you have a doctor, and a teacher, and a lawyer, and an Indian chief. Who are you going to throw overboard? Obviously the lawyer. Just kidding, I'm sure there's some great lawyers in here today. But, yeah, okay, so we don't throw the lawyer. If the kids were thinking, they'd say, well, wait a minute, we don't have to murder anybody. Let's just, one of us will take turns swimming alongside the raft, and after an hour we'll rotate, and nobody has to die. That's simple. But what happens? The kids think, oh, well, sure. Mom and Dad said murdering was wrong, and the pastor said murdering was wrong, and God said murdering was wrong, but obviously the only moral solution here is for us to get rid of somebody, for us to kill somebody. It's for the greater good. It's for the common good. It would be immoral not to murder somebody. Right? So what do the kids think? My mom and dad were wrong, pastor was wrong, Bible was wrong, and there is a time and a place for killing babies or killing old people or putting people in concentration camps, right? Morality just depends on the situation. If it's for the common good, hey, we have to kill a few people. What are you going to do, right? And again, we still think we send our kids to school for education. You don't have to believe me that that is not what's happening, right? This is the federal government's own data. Every 2 years, they do a national assessment of educational progress. And this is the federal government's own data. Only 1/3 of 8th graders are proficient in English. Only 1/3 of high school seniors are proficient in reading. Only 1/4 of high school seniors are proficient in math. And these dumbed down standards are about as dumb as you could get, right? I mean, our forefathers would have been laughing at us. Here's the Deputy Secretary of Education saying what I just told you. This is from a few days ago. The Deputy Education Secretary, mixed ice.
The National Assessment of Educational Progress, the NAEP, which is called America's Report Card, reports that 2/3, get this, 2/3 of American 8th graders are not proficient in any core subject.
2/3 are not proficient in any core subject. That means reading. That means math, right? That's our kids they're talking about, guys. We spend $20,000 a year per kid. They have them for 12 years at least. And they're not even proficient in reading, right? They become illiterate adults. The federal government did a literacy survey in 1993. They found that about 50% of Americans were either illiterate or so close to it that we can pretty much lump them all in the same category, right? They can't do a job, they can't find text in a document, they can't do anything, right? Some places, in 2003, another survey found the same thing. In Washington, D.C., it's even worse. The State Education Agency report, this came out in 2016, found that over 2/3 of the adult population in Washington, D.C. was functionally illiterate. And most of them have a high school diploma from a public school, which they can't read. All right? How do you get a high school diploma when you can't read? Somebody ought to ask somebody, right? And when they found this out, they said, oh, we have a crisis. Quick, everybody get on a plane, let's go to Cuba and see how they do it there. That's an absolutely true story. The mayor, the school board, the superintendent, they all went down to communist Cuba to see how the mass murdering Castro dictatorship brainwashes children. Absolutely true story. So even before I was born, people were starting to catch on to this. In 1983, Ronald Reagan put together a commission, National Commission on Excellence in Education. They came up with, and you guys know government reports and bureaus, you know, they don't typically use inflammatory language. But here they said that this educational system threatens our very future as a nation and as a people. And you know, it was bad in the 80s, but by comparison, it was phenomenal compared to what we have today. And even back then, it threatened our future as a nation and as a people. Let the implications of that sink in, guys. Your nation, the future of your people, is under threat as a result of this system. They said if a foreign power had done this to us, we would have viewed it as an act of war.
Absolutely.
And we should view it as an act of war. It was a calculated, strategic effort to overthrow our freedom and our system of government. And the reality is, we were not always this dumb. In fact, we were once geniuses. John Adams wrote in a letter to his friend that a native of America who cannot read or write is as rare as a comet or an earthquake. So, you know, it's conceivable that you might find one if you look really, really hard occasionally, but you don't see this every day, right? Thomas Jefferson used to brag that American farmers were the only ones in the world who read Homer. Go find yourself some high school kids today, some college graduates, ask them about Homer. Don't, right? Homer Simpson is all they know, right? They have no idea what you're even talking about. And the Federalist Papers, I mean, these were written for average Americans in the late 1700s, discussing the merits and demerits of the Constitution. Go find yourself a college graduate who can read this today, even in modern English. It goes right over their head. And yet these were written for blacksmiths, for farmers, for shopkeepers, I mean, not for PhDs in, you know, ancient political theory. We have a lot of data on early literacy in early America. By the end of the 1700s, 90% could read, almost 100% in cities like Boston, before we ever had 1 penny worth of government schools. 1812, this DuPont de Nemours did a survey, national education in the United States of America. He said not more than 4 in 1,000 young people are unable to write legibly, even neatly. Well, I can confess that I can't write legibly or neatly, not even close, and I bet there's a lot of people in this room that are in the same boat with me. So clearly they were doing better, right? And they did it all without 1 government school. They did it all without 1 penny worth of government education. Most of the kids learned how to read on the farm, right? From mom and dad, from aunts and uncles, from grandmas and grandpas, from older siblings, right? They used simple tools, the original Blueback Speller by Noah Webster, the New England Primer. They learned valuable moral lessons in Adam's Fall, We Sinned All. I mean, really important stuff. And then this guy came along, Horace Mann. And he had been inspired by the Prussians. The Prussians had actually been inspired by a communist named Robert Owen. He had created a communist commune in Indiana. It failed because communism is ridiculous. But instead of taking the proper lesson, he said, oh, I know the problem. It's because we didn't brainwash the kids young enough. We need a government school system. That's how we'll make communism work. Well, the Prussians got wind of this. They said, hey, let's do that. That's a great idea. They set up the first government education system in the world. Obviously, it didn't work out well for the Germans. We'll revisit that in a moment. Horace Mann loved it, though. They were segregating the children by age. They were indoctrinating them with statism. And this Horace Mann guy, he became the first ever Secretary of Education for any American state, because we didn't used to have government education back then. And he imported the Prussian model to Massachusetts, and eventually from there it spread outwards. He was a socialist. He thought public schools would equalize all men. He wanted the children to learn obedience. He wanted the Bibles out of the schools, which at the time was like inconceivable. It'd be like saying today, we shouldn't have reading, writing, math, or music in schools. What are you going to do there? I don't know. It would have been inconceivable. And yet that was his goal, under the guise of ending sectarianism. He also introduced this whole word method into the schools, quackery. And, you know, in fairness to him, he might not have known that it was quackery. They tried it out for a few years. All the schoolmasters in Boston got together. They wrote a tremendous debunking of this. They said, quote, the change proposed by Mr. Mann and others is neither called for nor sustained by sound reasoning. So just in a nutshell, if you want to know the whole story, we've got it all in this book here, Crimes of the Educators. But basically, instead of teaching the children that a T makes a T sound, and an A makes a sound, and a P makes a P sound, and then you spell tap, they teach the children to memorize the entire word, as if the word itself were a symbol. Kind of like you would learn Chinese, right? An ideographic writing system rather than one based on phonetic characters. And so, you know, this was developed for deaf children, and it worked for deaf children better than nothing. But when they tried it out in the regular schools, the kids started developing what today we would call dyslexia. So within a few years, they took it out, and we didn't hear about it again for a while. Around the same time that Horace Mann was promoting these ideas in America, Karl Marx was promoting the same ideas in Europe. And they found their most fertile ground in what would eventually become Germany, right? The German city-states and principalities and you know, Prussia and all these ended up creating a government school system. And then within a few generations, what's happened? They're all goose-stepping around, believing racial pseudo-science and quackery and putting people in camps and invading their neighbors and all the rest of it, right? And what happened? We bombed them to smithereens. So it didn't work out well for the Germans. It's not going to work out well for us either. 50 years after Horace Mann, this guy comes along, John Dewey. He looked to the Soviet Union for his inspiration rather than Prussia. He actually went there, wrote these glowing reports about how wonderful it was, how Lenin was instilling a collectivistic mentality into the children through the public school system. He wanted America to be socialist. His model was this book, Looking Backward, No Private Property. And he wanted a new social order, and he knew the schools were the way to do it. He also knew that Americans would not tolerate this. So he wrote in this essay that we actually reprinted in this book because it's so revealing. You know, we don't have to teach little kids how to read, write, and do math. That's maybe for later, right? What we really need to do is turn them into socialized collectivists. That's the goal of education. And so he wrote in this essay that change has to come gradually, can't force it unduly, or it would compromise its final success by favoring a violent reaction. Why would there be a violent reaction? Well, because parents want their kids to have an education, not a brainwashing. All right, so instead of going to parents and teachers, he went to the Rockefellers, and the Rockefellers were like, hey, good idea. Set up an experimental school. They gave him $3 million, set up an experimental school. They graduated a bunch of kids who couldn't read, who couldn't write, who couldn't tell right from wrong. They said, aha, perfect, let's do that nationwide. Excellent. So they did. They got them some positions at the University of Chicago, at the Teachers College at Columbia University. From there, they trained up armies of disciples. They combined it with these eugenicists that were coming out of Germany that believed that certain genes were better and we needed to get rid of inferior races and this kind of ridiculous stuff. They also believed in socialism. And they combined this stuff, weaponized it, took over the school system all across America, and brought us to today. Right? They also resurrected the whole word quackery that had been debunked in the 1840s under Horace Mann. Very deliberately, right? And then this guy, in 1955, there was a literacy crisis in America. So why aren't the kids learning to read anymore? Well, this guy blew the whistle and explained why. In 1955, Rudolf Flesch, he said that the teaching of reading all over the United States, in all the schools, in all the textbooks, is totally wrong and flies in the face of law, logic, and common sense. A very mild criticism, but he was right on the money, right? And so this caused a national scandal, and they put phonics back in some of the schools, and so probably a lot of you in this room can read as a result of this book. You should thank Mr. Flesch. And nowadays we have modern brain scans. This is a progressive scientist in France. You know, we wouldn't agree on much politically, but he does brain scans of children who've been exposed to the quackery versus children who learned how to read the correct way. And what he found is that when children learn to read using the quackery, not only do they not learn to read, but they get actual brain damage. The brain gets wired wrong. You have the right brain doing left brain things, left brain doing right brain things, and so the kids develop really permanent and very serious handicaps. We call it today dyslexia, reading disabilities, learning disabilities, all across the country, right? And you're probably not surprised to know that under Common Core, they still use the quackery, right? This is direct from the Common Core. The kids need to read common high-frequency words by sight. You got to memorize the words. This is what it looks like. Here's the list they should memorize for September. Here's the one for October. Instead of just teaching the poor kids how the letters sound and how you combine them and how you read, right? They get them to memorize a bunch of words. And a really smart kid might be able to memorize maybe 1,000, maybe 2,000 words. What happens when you come to a word you haven't memorized? Or that uses a different font? And you're in trouble, right? Then you have to use your word attack skills. I say, oh, don't worry, we sprinkle in a little bit of phonics too. Yeah, after you've done the damage, after you've built this harmful reflex in the minds of the children. And so now naturally the UN says kids all over the world need to learn to read this way. Now I want to talk about John Dewey's religion for a minute, because you can't understand John Dewey unless you understand his religion. He was a very religious man. Not in the sense that we might recognize, but he described himself as religious. He was not a Christian, he was not a Muslim, he was not a Buddhist, he was not a Hindu. His religion, to quote him, was religious humanism. That was his religion. And he wrote and signed, along with 30-something other quacks, the first Humanist Manifesto. And the very first tenet, this is a direct quote, religious humanists regard the universe as self-existing and not created. Okay? And some of you are probably thinking of the first words in the Bible in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Right? Amen. So it's a direct attack on the authority of Scripture, a direct attack on everything. Right? I mean, if God didn't create the heavens and the earth, your worldview is radically different, right? And even if you're not a Bible-believing Christian, this has enormous implications to you too, right? Our founding fathers in America said it was a self-evident truth that God created us equally and that God gave us individual rights. Life, liberty, property, all these things. Well, what happens if there is no God, as John Dewey believed? And that takes a lot of faith. I don't know where he got all that faith, but I don't know how you could believe that. But what happens if you don't believe in God, if there is no God? There are no God-given rights. In fact, there's no rights at all, right? If you read the rest of the Humanist Manifesto, it's just communism wrapped up in religious garb, right? Humanists believe that a profit motive is bad. We've got to have collective ownership of the means of production. His buddy, who also signed this Humanist Manifesto, wrote in his book, Humanism, A New Religion, that education is the most powerful ally of humanism. Public schools are going to become the engines of humanism. What can a theistic Sunday school do 1 hour a week against 5 days of humanistic teachings in a public school? Absolutely nothing, right? Absolutely nothing, and they knew it. More recently in the Humanist magazine, this guy said the classroom is going to be the arena of the conflict between the old and the new, the rotting corpse of Christianity and the new faith of humanism. Right, so they're telling you that the classroom is where they're going to bring your children into their crazy new religion. And in fact, it's not actually a new religion. Some of you guys might recognize this. We don't have a real God. We just all get to be our own little gods and goddesses. We can all decide for ourselves what's right and wrong, right? There's no transcendent, objective source of morality. Well, where have we heard that before? Oh yeah, that snake in Genesis 3:5, right? God knows that when you eat that fruit, then your eyes will be open. You'll be as gods, knowing good and evil. So we've heard this before. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court made this the national religion of the United States of America. In 1962, they took up this case. The state of New York had this prayer. Catholics, Protestants, and Jews had developed it. God, we acknowledge our dependence on you. The Supreme Court said, no, First Amendment, you can't have that. Against the law. Then in 1963, no more Bible reading. Again, First Amendment, right? Anybody read the First Amendment? It says Congress shall make no law. Right? It doesn't say the state of New York shall make no law. It doesn't say my local school district shall make no law. It says Congress. Right? In fact, anybody who would have known history at that time would have said that's crazy. When the First Amendment was ratified, most of our states had established churches. Right? Anybody who thinks the founding fathers meant to prohibit prayer in school has no idea about American history. It's ludicrous. And ironically, the Supreme Court did exactly what Congress was prohibited from doing. They established a national religion. And this Justice Potter Stewart, who dissented on these opinions, pointed that out in his dissent. He said this refusal to permit religious exercises is thus seen not as a state of neutrality with respect to religion, but rather as the establishment of a religion of secularism. Right? Congress can't establish a national religion, but the Supreme Court can, and that's what they did. Right? That's why our kids are shooting each other in schools. That's why our kids are fornicating and killing their babies. That's why they're on drugs. That's why they're not learning anything. That's why our society is collapsing all around us. And now it's going global. Right? Back in the 1940s, the UN announced boldly that it was going global. Their Human Rights Declaration said all children have a human right to a compulsory education that teaches them to further the activities of the UN. They created the UN Education Agency, UNESCO. This guy, the first Secretary General, a socialist and a humanist, he said we're going to build world government in the minds of men. They put out pamphlets for teachers that schools have to combat family attitudes. They brought all the governments of the world together in Thailand in 1990, and they came up with the first ever global educational agreement. Article 5, all the children have to be subjected to the same standards of learning. And then Article 10, basic learning content required by all human beings is not the responsibility of the family or the school board or Congress or even the Supreme Court. It is now a common and universal responsibility. So Robert Mugabe and Kim Jong-un and Fidel Castro, they all get to help decide what the children must learn. In 2000, they got even bolder. They met in Senegal. Every government on the planet agreed to these. They said governments must implement integrated strategies to change the attitudes, values, practices, and beliefs of children. Right? Here's the Secretary General of the UN explaining what he thinks is the purpose of an education.
The education must do more than produce individuals who can read, write, and count. It must nurture global citizens who can rise to the challenges of the 21st century.
Quick show of hands, how many sent their kids to school so they become good global citizens? All right, I've given this talk to tens of thousands of people now. Kip mentioned my speaking tour here in this area. I've been on the road for months and months and months with my family. I've given this talk more than 80 times in like 38 states now. Not one person has raised their hand saying they sent their kid to school to become a global citizen. And yet they're telling you that the purpose of education is to turn your kids into global citizens, right? As far as I'm concerned, I'm first and foremost a citizen of heaven. Secondarily, I'm a citizen of the United States of America. I have no interest in being a citizen of the world or a global citizen. But then in 2016, they got another education agreement. They said education must include integrated development of the whole person, including their spirituality. We'll come right back to that. They said education must advance the cause of global citizenship. This is Irina Bokova. She ran the UNESCO until last year, member of the Bulgarian Communist Party, top official in the Bulgarian communist dictatorship before it ostensibly collapsed. They only slaughtered like 250,000 people, so as far as communist regimes go, it wasn't all that bad, out of a population of like 7 million. You know, they're minor leagues, but pretty serious anyway. And she hates me, by the way, with a passion, which really makes me happy. But she sent out this press release to everybody on the UNESCO's mailing list on the journalism side. They said we have the collective duty to empower every child, that means your kids too, with the right values to shape the future as responsible global citizens. And then you go further on UNESCO's website, they have a toolkit for education for sustainable development. They'll tell you more highly educated people have higher incomes and they consume more resources than poorly educated people. In this case, more education increases the threat to sustainability. You think they want your kids to be well educated? You can be sure they don't. This is a board game they have for children all over the world. You can download it on UNESCO's website. You have to get the right answer before you can move to the next box. And here's one of the questions. You should read the whole deck. They're crazy. What is the best way to fight poverty? And if you have two brain cells to rub together, you look around the world, what are the richest societies on the planet? Well, you have America, you have Japan, you have Canada, you have Australia, you have Switzerland. What do they all have in common? Private property rights, free markets, and at least some tenuous connection to biblical principles. So there's how you solve poverty, right? How you fight poverty. Well, they teach the kids that the correct answer is you have to share the wealth produced in the world. And if you want to know how well that works, ask the people of Venezuela. They lost about 25 pounds on average over the last year due to malnutrition, because they're sharing the wealth produced in Venezuela. It's not working out well for them. Here's the UN telling you what they're doing. Check it out.
The Education 2030 Agenda is our roadmap to inclusive and quality education for all. UNESCO, the UN specialized agency for education, is leading the global and regional coordination of this ambitious goal, responding to cutting-edge global challenges, supporting countries to build better education systems, and monitoring progress to make sure the world stays on course.
They're supporting countries to build better education systems, and they're monitoring progress to make sure we all stay on course. But that's not for America, right? That's for like third world countries that don't have proper education, right? Wrong. Here's Arnie Duncan. He spent 7 years as Secretary of Education in America, and he gave a speech to UNESCO. And he said that UNESCO is the global partner of the U.S. government in fundamentally transforming education. He bragged that they're turning our children into green global citizens. He said that education, he quoted a communist terrorist, I won't tell you which one because we need a whole other presentation, but he said, education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. They're weaponizing your kids. And they said education is a global public good unconstrained by national boundaries. He said we're putting the sustainability movement, we're advancing the sustainability movement through education, we're building the science of sustainability into the curriculum at every level, and now we get to the World Core Curriculum. We now have a World Core Curriculum. Not a lot of people know that. You can read them at the UNESCO's website. They say it should be taught in every school on this planet. And if this is the World Core Curriculum, and it is, we should find out what it is, right? So it was developed by this guy here, Robert Mueller. He said the United Nations was the body of Christ. And if you're a Christian, you know that's blasphemy, that's heresy. He also was the author of the World Core Curriculum. He said it needs to teach the child to see himself as part of the greater whole. And you can get a copy of the teacher's manual for the World Core Curriculum. I suggest that you do. He wrote the foreword to it. He said the underlying philosophy upon which it's based will be found in the teachings of the books of Alice Bailey by the Tibetan teacher Jwal Khul. And to most Americans, that means absolutely nothing, because we don't know who Alice Bailey is, and we don't know who Jwal Khul is. Well, I'm going to give you guys a hint. Alice Bailey was the founder of the Lucifer Publishing Company. They changed the name now to the Lucius Trust because it was just a little controversial, as you might imagine. And this Tibetan teacher, right? Turns out he's not Tibetan, he's not a teacher, and he's not even a human being, right? Alice Bailey claimed to be in communication with these spiritual entities she described as ascended masters. Jwal Khul was the chief of these, and you know, if you've read your Bible, you know we're not talking about ascended masters, right? We're talking about demons. But anyways, they would take over her body, and they would write these books about education and all the rest of the stuff. And one of the books they wrote is called Education in the New Age. So if the World Core Curriculum is based on the teachings of Alice Bailey and this Jwal Khul, let's see what they have to say. You should read this book, by the way. It'll blow your mind. It says, world citizenship should be the goal of the enlightened, with a world federation, a world government, and a world brain. Our problem is to attain the kind of overall synthesis that Marxism, that wonderful ideology that's only killed 100 million people in the last 100 years, and neo-scholasticism provide for their followers, but to get there by the freely chosen cooperative methods that John Dewey advocated. So now we're back to our friend John Dewey, the religious humanist, right? You starting to see where this is going, folks? Right? And it's not me telling you this is them telling you this, right? I can tell you my opinion, but that's not what we're interested in. In 2015, the UN bragged that now over 100 countries had national education systems lined up with the international system. In America, we called that Common Core. This is the guy who put $2.3 billion into Common Core, Bill Gates. He was the largest financier of Common Core, except for us, the sucker taxpayers who had to pay for it. And what less people know is that in 2004, he went over to Europe. Here he is with the head of UNESCO at that time. And they signed an agreement. He signed on behalf of Microsoft, one of the most powerful corporations in the world. They said, we're going to create a global syllabus, a global master curriculum to train all the teachers so they can fan out and train all the children. They said, we agree with the UNESCO Constitution, which was written by communists. And that's where this is going, folks, right? The name World Core Curriculum and Common Core, the resemblance is more than coincidental. I want to show you real quick a commercial that the Common Core people put out explaining to you exactly what I'm trying to tell you right now. Check this out. Oopsies.
Up until now, it's been pretty hard to tell how well kids are competing in school and how well they're going to do when they get out of school. Is a girl in your neighborhood being taught as much as her friend over in the next one? Is a graduating senior in, say, St. Louis as prepared to get a job as the graduate in Shanghai?
Shanghai, that's an interesting choice.
The answer to both of these questions is no. Because for years, states have been setting different standards for what students should know and be able to do at each grade level. What we really need are clear goals. That's where the Common Core state standards come in. The standards are consistent from school to school, and they match up against international standards too.
International standards?
Now we know how we're doing compared to just about everyone.
Seattle, Chicago, Shanghai, and Paris.
Still design their own curriculum.
This is them telling you, right? It's not me. Same rules. Everybody can compete on the same kind of staircase, right? That's them telling you, right? Common Core is part of a global system, folks. That's where this is moving. Unfortunately, it hasn't stopped under the current administration. Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos went down to Argentina last year, signed a global declaration with the Saudis, with the Chinese, right? The Saudis will chop your head off for becoming a Christian or for having a Bible, or they'll crucify you, literally. The Communist Chinese have murdered more human beings than any government in all of human history. They're up at about 100 million now if you don't count the forced abortions. What common values do we have with these insane totalitarian mass murdering regimes? I don't know. But they said they're going to keep infusing their common values into our schools. They said we're going to keep internationalizing education, and we're going to keep advancing sustainable development. That's them telling you this, right? And it's still going on even under the current administration. I'm very sad to report. Trump did get us out of UNESCO, which is a big step, but UNESCO propaganda is in every one of our schools, and Common Core is in every one of our schools. Here's the polling data again. The great majority of our young people are socialists. Young people are leaving their churches in droves. The Nehemiah Institute did a study. 80% of Christian children from good Christian homes with 2 Christian parents will leave their churches after 12 years in a government brainwash camp. 80%, guys. Our churches aren't going to survive. It's like playing Russian roulette, except you have 5 rounds in the chamber rather than 1, right? Think about it, guys. That's where this is going. Here you see Protestant Christianity in catastrophic decline. Here you see the red line, none, the humanist, the secularist. And really this is misleading, right? Because a lot of these people up here who self-identify as Christians are really humanists. They just say they're Christian because their parents told them that, or because they went to church when they were kids. They believe in the religion of humanism. So you guys remember when Obama said that whatever we once were, we're no longer a Christian nation? I hate to agree with Obama, but he was right. That's where we are today, folks. It's sad, but it's true. So that was all primary source information, documented fact. You can find it all yourselves in their own documents, in their own videos. I'm going to spend just a few minutes now telling you my opinion about all this, what we do about it, and much more importantly, what God says about all these things. Okay, because God has a lot to say about all these things. So I'm going to just show you a couple of scriptures, and then we'll be done. So the first question we need to ask is, can we reform the system? Right? Can we make it better? If we all run for school board, can we make the system better? Unfortunately, we can't, guys. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do. I'm writing a series right now on the history of public education for the Epoch Times. I don't know if you read the Epoch Times. If you don't, you should. It's a good paper. But you can find those there. The next one should be published today. And you'll find out that the people who created this system wanted it to crank out little socialists and little humanists who would overthrow the free system of government that we had in America. That's what it was designed to do. If you take your car and it's working perfectly to your mechanic and say, fix it, what do you mean fix it? It's running great. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's producing little socialists and little humanists who will burn down this country as soon as they have the chance. This guy actually blew the whistle. He was involved. He described a secret society founded by Robert Owen and these other criminals to create a public education system. Mind you, this was before we had a public education system. And he was involved. He said he was organizing New York for this. He said the great object was to get rid of Christianity. We were going to set up a system of state and national schools. We were going to exclude all religion. And we were going to compel parents to send their children there by law. And at the time, people said, that's the most ridiculous thing I ever heard. People would never go for that. And guess what? That's our reality today, isn't it? He was right. So he actually came to Christ and he repented of this evil and he tried to blow the whistle. Nobody listened. We should have listened. But we can't reform it, guys. It's doing what it's supposed to do. This is Congressman Thomas Massey. Really great guy. I met him at the John Birch Society's 60th anniversary dinner. He was one of the speakers. And I interviewed him about a great bill he's got, H.R. 899, to abolish the Department of Education. Phenomenal bill. We should all support it. But I think there's a misunderstanding out there. The idea that if we abolish the U.S. Department of Education, we're going to cut off the head of the snake. It's not a snake, folks. It's like a hydra, right? It's got all these tentacles. And yeah, the U.S. Department of Education is one, but you could cut off that tentacle and 5 more will regrow, right? The system is the problem, not the Department of Education. So it's a great bill. I encourage you to support it. In the interest of time, we'll skip this. But as I see it now, we've got 2 options and 2 options only. Option 1, we get our kids out of the public school system as quickly as possible, as fast as we can, in as large numbers as we can. Option 2, get ready for slavery, guys. Get ready to lose your country, to lose your freedom, to lose your churches, to lose your families, to lose your property, to lose your rights. That's it, guys. It's all going to be gone. Look at the polling data, and it's getting worse every year. Those are the only 2 options as I see it. There's good news. Only 3 out of 10 parents would choose to send their children to a public school. 7 out of 10 would rather take them out. It's a good start. You know, that's okay. I wonder what's wrong with those 3. You know, who knows what's going on there. But it's, you know, they need to understand the urgency of this, guys. They need to understand the urgency. So I borrow this term from my friend E. Ray Moore, who's been on this mission for a long time. We need a Dunkirk operation. And if you went to public school, I'll give you just a quick background, quick refresher course, because you probably didn't learn this. But the British Army was stranded on the beaches of Dunkirk on the verge of being completely annihilated by Adolf Hitler's National Socialists. Completely annihilated. They would have lost the war right there, right then. So the British people got on their knees and they prayed. They said, God, we need a miracle. Please help us rescue our fighting men and women. Otherwise, we're going to be all speaking German here very soon. And so they put every resource in their society at the disposal of this rescue operation. Everything that could float went across the English Channel. Canoes, fishing boats, merchant vessels, Navy ships, everything that could float. Sailboats, yachts. Picked up as many boys as they could possibly fit on those ships, and they brought them back to the British Isles. And guess what? I can proudly report today that they are not speaking German on the British Isles. They may be speaking Arabic soon, but we'll talk about that another day. But so it worked, right? That's how we need to think of our children. Our children are on the beaches at Dunkirk. They are about to be annihilated by the National Socialists. We need to get busy, folks. We need to put every reason. There's nothing more urgent that I can think of than getting those boys off of that beach and getting them back to the safety of our homes, of our churches, of our communities. I talk about it as a burning building, right? If the public school building was on fire, you wouldn't form a committee. You wouldn't go to your school board. You wouldn't start a petition. You would run into the school and you would grab your child and you would run as fast as you could in the other direction. That's what we need to be doing now. right? And the fire is only going to physically damage your child, right? I mean, they might get burned, and that's serious. The public schools are going to physically damage your child, and morally, and academically, and intellectually, and spiritually. You can't afford to leave your kids there, folks. So first things first, get your kids out. If you're a grandparent, talk to your kids about getting their kids out. That's what we need to be doing. Pastors, priests, rabbis, guys, you're part of the problem. Why didn't you warn people about all this happening? And I don't mean to sound condescending. I love pastors. But they need to get involved in this fight, right? Parents would not be sending their kids to public schools if the pastors told them what was happening in the public schools. It's that simple.
They have to work.
We'll talk about work in a minute. But so pastors, priests, first you need to warn your congregation. God says you're a shepherd of your congregation. And right now, a lot of people in your congregation are voluntarily handing their children over to the wolves. And it's because you didn't warn them. And you also need to help, right? If you don't have a Christian school at your church, why not? Why don't you have a Christian school there? Maybe it's too small. Then get together with 10 other pastors. You guys can start a joint Christian school. Right? And there's poor people in the congregation. Set up a scholarship fund. Maybe you set up a scholarship fund for homeschoolers so that nobody has an excuse, right? We have plenty of resources in the body of Christ to get our kids out, but we need the pastors and the priests and the rabbis to lead the way. So we also need to ask a few questions. Why do we have education, and who should be in charge of education? And here's where I turn to God's Word. God's Word has a lot to say about this. We've got a few scriptures, and we'll wrap it up. First of all, God says in Proverbs 22:6 that Caesar ought to train up the child in the way that he should go. And some of you are laughing, and you're like, but he didn't say that. Right? Of course he didn't say that. Parents should train up the child in the way that he should go, and even when he's old, he won't depart from it. Right? Parents, not Caesar. You can read the Bible upside down, sideways, every which way. You will never find any authority for Caesar to be involved in education. That's where we went wrong, folks. Parents are the ones who are supposed to be in charge of the education of the children. What should an education look like? Well, here's the start. Deuteronomy 6:6-7. These commandments I give to you, have them on your heart and impress them on your children all the time, right? When you sit, when you're at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie, when you get up, all the time you need to be impressing these on your kids. Caesar, raise up the children. No, right? Fathers, bring up your children in the discipline and instruction of the Lord, right? Fathers and mothers is who God is talking to here. So what should an education look like? God tells us in Proverbs 9:10 that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. God tells us in Proverbs 1:7 that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. You guys know just as well as I do that the Lord is less welcome in a public school today than head lice and cockroaches, maybe even than school shooters, right? They'll have heroin in the school before they'll have the name of the Lord. You think they're going to get any knowledge there? You think they're going to get any wisdom there? Well, of course they're not, right? Of course they're not. And what does God tell us if you don't have any knowledge? My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. That's us, folks. We're fixing to be destroyed because our children have no knowledge at all. Martin Luther said that a school that didn't teach the scriptures was going to become the great gates of hell. Pope Pius XI said that any education without God at the center of it is false and full of error. Okay, Harvard was once a good university, believe it or not. I know some of you are like, nah, it was at one time. This was their original mission. They said that the main end of the student's life and studies is to know God. That's the main end, right? That's the main purpose of their education. John Milton said the end of learning, the purpose of learning, is to repair the ruins of our first parents by regaining to know God aright, and then out of that knowledge to love Him, imitate Him, and to be like Him. That's the main end of our education, right? That's what we should be teaching. And then we were very blessed to be born in a self-governing republic. And as a self-governing people, we need to be able to govern ourselves. And right now we can't, right? And God says a lot about government, right? Government should punish evil, right? You're killing babies, you go to jail. That's where baby killers belong. So we need to be able to raise our children so that they can govern themselves as a free people. And right now that's not happening. Homeschooling is incredible. That's not really my family, it's just a picture of my family. That's my lovely wife and the kids there. And we homeschool, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. People say, I can't afford to homeschool. You know what? I'll live in a box before I'll send my kids to a public school. And that's the God honest truth. So homeschooling is we're in good company, right? These men here created the greatest, freest nation that has ever existed in human history, and not one of them ever stepped foot in a government school. In fact, most of them were homeschooled for most of their education. A few of them got some, a few years in a private academy or a church academy, and then some of them got college degrees, but the bulk of their education was at home with their parents and with their families. So if they could do it and then create one of the greatest nations, if not the greatest nation that has ever existed in the entirety of human history, then I'm pretty sure we can handle it too. Right? There's some great homeschool facts. Millions of American children today are being homeschooled. They're running circles around the victims of the government schools, 80th to 90th percentile on the government's own standardized tests at less than 5% of the cost with just a few hours a day. This is true even if the parents don't have a high school diploma. I tell people kind of like half jokingly, you could put your kids in a closet for 12 years and they'd be better off, right? And I'm only half kidding. Right? So this is the truth, right? The homeschooled kids do better as adults too. They do less drugs, they start better companies, they're better socialized, their marriages last longer, their kids are healthier and happier. In everything you can measure, homeschoolers do better. I know not everybody can homeschool, not everybody's called to homeschool, some single parents, I know everybody's got something. Well, there's also a lot of great private schools out there, some great Catholic schools, some great Protestant schools, and also some terrible ones. Half of the Catholic dioceses in America today are using Common Core. That ought to be a pretty big red flag. Don't send your kids to a Common Core school and spend $8,000 for the privilege, right? A lot of the Protestant schools are using government school textbooks. Why in the world would they do that? It's terrible. So do your due diligence. I happen to teach at the Freedom Project Academy. It's an online K-12 school based on Christian values. They'll learn phonics, they'll learn real history, real science. It'll cost you less than 1/10 of what the government charges you to brainwash these kids and turn out a bunch of illiterates. It's about $2,400 a year for a full year for one student. We can set up a school right in your church. There's also other great online schools. Bob Jones University has one. There's all kinds of great alternatives now in this technological age, and they're cost effective. Then we need to know that we need to defend our educational liberty, right? First step, we got to protect our kids. Secondly, we have to defend educational liberty. The UN told us in 2015, the Human Rights Council, Cuba, Venezuela, China, all these guys on there, they said that it's not okay that all these kids are being educated in private schools that aren't being regulated by the government and aren't teaching the global standards. All schools need to do this, and governments must intervene to make that happen. They're not happy about our private schools. Here's New York, right? State of New York outlines new guidelines for what private schools must teach. And first they're coming for the Jews, right? They're coming for the yeshivas because they're not brainwashing the kids with enough pseudoscience and fake history. How dare they teach them the Torah? But it's not going to end with the Jews, right? It didn't end with the Jews in Germany. They're going to come for us next too. Again, they're brainwashing your kids with absolutely insane ideas, with satanic filth. They're dumbing down your kids on a scale you can't even imagine. If you want to know that story, again, we got some copies of this book here. And we need to be serious about it. You know, some of us say, well, I got my guns. They can't impose tyranny on me. I got my guns. And don't get me wrong, I'm a gun guy too. They'll take my guns from my cold dead hands, and that's the truth. But guys, they don't need your guns. They have your kids, right? What are you going to do with your guns when it's your kids who come to confiscate them? Nothing at all, right? And so Hitler put it this way. He said, when an opponent declares, I will not come over to your side, I just calmly say, your child already belongs to us. Right? You're going to pass on soon, but your kids are now firmly in the new camp. In a short time, they will know nothing else but this new community. Go talk to some high school kids today. Go talk to some college kids today. They know nothing else but this new community. They don't know anything about our founders. They don't know anything about our Constitution. They don't know anything about the Declaration of Independence or anything that matters. They know all about, fake climate change. They know gender theory, all the rest of it. They don't know anything about anything that matters. And they couldn't find out if they wanted to. They can't even read. Right? So we need an exodus from government schools. We can look to our founding fathers for inspiration. They risked their lives and their fortunes and their sacred honor so that we could be free. And guess what, guys? Fortunately, we don't have to risk our lives, right? That's nice. It is a sacrifice to homeschool your kids or to put them in a private school. I know, I live it. But hey, we don't have to risk our lives. That's nice, right? And there's a lot of good benefits to that. Finally, if you're not involved in the John Birch Society yet, why not? These are the people who've been holding the line for freedom for 60 years. We would not be free to have this meeting were it not for the John Birch Society. It's named after a Christian missionary, Captain John Birch. He joined U.S. intelligence during World War II before being murdered by the Chinese communists, the first victim of the Cold War, murdered by communists. We got chapters all over the country. The goal is to have less government, more responsibility, and with God's help, that's the key part, right? Without God's help, you might as well go home. You're not going to accomplish anything. With God's help, a better world, right? We're going to have leadership and constitutional principles. So talk to Kip here afterwards. He can sign you up. Talk to some of the chapter leaders here. This is the organization that has held the line, and if not for them, we would already be slaves. If you want to support my tour, I've got a whole bunch more stops. I'll be in Nevada next week. After that, I'll be in Idaho. Going to Utah after that. I've been to 36, 38 states now. Go to libertysentinel.org/tour. You'll find a list of the dates, times, places, contact people, all that. If you know anybody in Idaho or anywhere, send them there, and they can come out. And I'm going to ask you just for one thing before you go. Get a copy of, what are they, $1 or $2?
Yeah, $1.
Okay, so get a copy of this. It's a magazine that has everything that you just saw today. Well, not quite everything. Some of it's more recent, but everything you need to know about what's happening in the public school system. Get a copy for yourself. If you agree that this is the battle upon which all our other battles hinge upon, order yourself a stack of 100. If you agree already, get 10, get 20, get 30. Give them to your congressman, to your state legislator, to your neighbors, to your pastor, to the elders at your church. Get this out, guys. We want to get 1 million copies out. We're on our 7th printing now. We've got a long way to go, but we can do it. For our illiterate friends, and we know there's lots of you, we've got a DVD. So you get a copy of the DVD if you want. It's a similar talk to this one. I gave it some months ago, so it'll be a lot of similar information. And then finally, guys, I just want to close with a scripture, because I don't want anybody to leave here and just think like, oh, it's just a political battle. We just elect good Republicans, or it's just an educational battle. Guys, it's so much more than that, right? Alice Bailey understood what it was. John Dewey understood what it was. The United Nations understands what it is, and so we need to understand as well. God tells us what it is, in fact, over and over again. But I love this scripture here because it's just so powerful. It's so concise. God tells us we wrestle not against flesh and blood. It's not just people we're dealing with here, right? We wrestle against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, and against spiritual wickedness in high places. Think of the drag queen with the demon horns, right? We're dealing with spiritual wickedness in high places, folks, and they're coming for your children. So get involved. God tells us what weapons we can use. Turn to Ephesians 6 when you have some time. Get involved with us. Help out on this fight. God bless you all. God bless America. And here's Kip.